Next, from Springfield, House Speaker Michael Madigan holds a press conference on reducing the state deficit and the current budget stalemate between the governor and state Democrats. This runs about 15 minutes.
So good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
And as Steve stated, we'd like to begin just by reiterating this press statement of yesterday, which is consistent with what I've been saying for several weeks and several months, that the number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit, and that we ought to be focused on working to eliminate the budget deficit. When rating agencies talk about Illinois and critique Illinois, they talk about the problem with the budget deficit, and they recommend that we work to eliminate the budget deficit. They do not talk about changes in workers' compensation. They do not talk about changes in collective bargaining. They do not talk about changes in the prevailing wage. They talk about the amount of money coming in, the amount of money going out, and that more money is going out than is coming in. That condition is layered on top of a structural deficit which has been brought forward over several years, and a severe underfunding in the pension systems. So, again, my recommendation to everybody is let's focus on the budget deficit, let's be reasonable, let's work in moderation, not in the extreme. And if all of that happens, we can work to solve this problem. So, we'd call upon Amanda, but I don't think she's ready.
I don't think I am either.
Questions?
Mr. Speaker, with the ALPLM director leaving, Eileen Makovich, how does that change your plan to make ALPLM its own agency?
I still feel that the Lincoln Library should be an independent entity. It should not be under the jurisdiction of another state agency. It's clearly an asset of the state of Illinois. It's clearly an asset of the city of Springfield. We ought to be working to improve the viability of that asset, and we can best do that by changing the governance structure, creating a separate entity appointed by the governor. The governor would appoint the board of directors, confirmed by the Senate, and then let that group focus on improvements at the library so that we can make it even better than it is today.
Yeah, specifically, what's keeping it from reaching its potential? You make it sound like there's room for improvement.
Well, I think one of the problems is the current governance structure, where the people at the library are not in a position to make their own decisions that relate to the operations of the library, improvements of the library. Everything has to be decided by another state agency, which is a mid-range agency. It's not even a high-level agency. So again, if there are problems, if there are corrections that can be done, if there are improvements that can be done, let's identify a high-quality board of directors, a reasonable number of people confirmed by the Senate, let them select an executive director and get about the business of doing the improvements that should be made.
So will there be a vote today on the expansion of the homeowners exemption for Chicago?
The question again?
Do you plan to have a vote today on the floor on the mayor's plan to expand the homeowners?
Yeah, that's a decision to be made by the bill sponsor, Representative Curry.
Have you talked to her about?
We discussed it in our caucus, and it was a full discussion of the particulars of the bill. The discussion today was such that I don't think the bill is in final form. Representative Curry knew everything about the bill, and she was able to answer all the questions put to her about the bill. But just listening to the discussion in our caucus, I would say it may not be in final form.
So has anything happened since the House was last in town here to move this process along and bring it to a resolution?
Well, you probably know I've had 3 meetings with the governor over the last 4 to 5 weeks. They've been very cordial meetings. We've had a very full discussion of the issues which are before the legislature and before the governor's office. I would say that we have not plowed any new ground, but we weren't screaming and shouting at each other, and we were exchanging ideas and exchanging positions in a very cordial manner.
Has
Speaker,
anything changed in your conversations with him at all, though? I mean, you've always said that it's been cordial. Is there movement at all?
I would say that it's better that we meet and talk than not meet and talk, and so meeting and talking is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I'm sure you would agree with me, right?
Do you have an
What
opinion on
was
the-
preventing you from meeting before, though? I mean, there was nothing that was stopping.
Well, it's probably just a case of scheduling.
Do you have an opinion on Leslie Munger, the comptroller, saying that she is not going to make on-time the payment for the pension system?
I would think that's contrary to a policy which has been followed by everybody in state government now for 4 to 5 to 6 years. So when the legislature first became actively involved in attempting to solve the problem of the unfunded liability of the pension systems, why, one resolve, which appeared to be agreed by everybody, was that we would make the full pension payment. There's an acknowledgement that part of the problem with the funding of the pension systems relates to partial payments in the past over several years. And so, again, over 4 to 5, maybe 6 years, there seems to be universal agreement in the legislature that we should make the full pension payments. And the appropriation bills adopted by the legislature provide for that level of payment. In addition, we've provided that the pension systems are under continuing appropriation language in the statute. Again, another action taken by the legislature to work to ensure that those pension payments would be made. I'm not familiar with all of Leslie Munger's thinking. I would just refer her to this recent history, where there seems to be a unified position in state government that after we make our debt service payment, we should make our pension payments.
Speaker, the governor has intimated that he's been doing all the compromising in his talks with you, that he had a long list, and now he's down to about 4. His intimation is that you've not given up anything. Have you made any compromises?
I have. Correct. Previously, both the House and the Senate have passed bills which would change workers' compensation. I've directed Representative Hoffman, who's the chair of the House Labor Committee and the point person among House Democrats on issues like workers' compensation, to engage in a discussion with the Senate to work toward a reconciliation of the differences between the two bills. So the legislature would be in a position to give the governor a bill that would make changes in workers' compensation. The governor has requested of us that we permit him to privatize the operations of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The House has passed that bill. The House provided that there'd be an opportunity for all Illinoisans and all members of the legislature to review what happens under privatization. And therefore, we placed a 3-year sunset in the bill. The governor apparently objects to the sunset. I don't know why. It simply provides that there can be a scheduled review of what happens after 3 years of privatization. This is a common practice with the regulation of different occupations by the state, where there are sunsets placed in the bills. Next, one of the governor's requests is for a property tax freeze. And we've now called that bill in the House 15 times. And on 15 occasions, the House Republicans have declined to support the bill. Had they supported the bill, that bill would have passed the House months ago. It would be in the Senate under consideration in the Senate. The governor requested that we suspend the anticipated COLA adjustment for members of the legislature. We did that. In addition, we kept at a reduced level the amounts of payments for per diem and travel allowance when we're in regular session. On these days through the summer, where we have not been in regular session, nor in the veto session, why our members have not received any per diem or any travel allowance when they've been in Springfield. The governor requested an appropriation for federal funds only. We did that. And at the governor's request, we added general revenue fund money for McCormick Place. We suggested at the time that we had money for women with breast and cervical cancer and children with disabilities, but the governor and the House Republicans refused to support those propositions. So those are areas where, in my judgment, we've met the governor halfway. We've made compromises with him. I think we've done a lot. I think that we've done a lot to bring on the compromise.
Mr. Speaker, the administration said today that the Illinois Finance Authority is considering a plan that would allow them to give loans to municipalities to make up for the 911 surcharge money and the motor fuel tax that they're not getting. Is that a plan that should go forward, or I know there's alternate legislation?
I'm not familiar with that plan. That's the first time that I've heard of it. I would simply say what you were about to say, which is that there's a bill in the House, I believe it was reported favorably by the Executive Committee today, which would appropriate a variety of items where the money will not be spent by the state government. The money will be spent by someone else. So local road money for municipalities, counties, townships, the lottery money, which will be spent on winners of the lottery, the money that's due to local governments because of video poker and the casino gaming, and there's a few other areas. The general theory here is that this is money that will not be spent by the state government. It'll be spent by someone else, and therefore we plan to advance that bill in the House.
When would you do that?
Well, again, on all of these matters, these decisions are made by the bill sponsors. So the bill sponsor there is Mr. Moylan. We plan to be here on November 10, and Mr. Moylan would have the opportunity to call that bill on November 10 if he so wishes. Right here.
When do you foresee this being resolved? And what role, if any, do you think either the filing deadline next month, the March primary, or the changing threshold on votes in January?
Had everybody been reasonable and moderate, it would have been solved in May. The legislature passed to the governor a spending plan in May, and he vetoed much of it, not all of it, but vetoed much of it. And today, there are many people and many groups telling us, historically, we've received money from the state government, and we'd like to continue to receive money from the state government, but we were in the May spending plan, and we were vetoed by the governor. Our position hasn't changed since May. We sent the spending plan to the governor. We explained to the governor that under the Constitution, he had the constitutional ability to do line item vetoes, which he did in certain instances, and reduction vetoes, that he could have used those veto powers under the Constitution to fashion that spending plan to his liking. He chose not to do that. We stand ready to support the May spending plan. We stand ready to do changes in that plan if appropriate. And contrary to some, I've said publicly that the state should do a balanced approach to the elimination of the budget deficit. We should do some cuts, and we should do some new revenue. I think that's where everybody should be. Balanced approach, some cuts, some new revenue. Be reasonable, be
Do you
moderate,
think,
don't be
though,
extreme.